Time Walk with Me.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Time Walk with Me. Today we are looking at my mono black deck featuring these two fine fellows as the commanders. They both have partner, as of course they would have to both be the commander of a single deck. We got Sengir, the Dark Baron. He's a 4/4 legendary vampire noble creature with flying, and whenever another creature dies that is on either side, on any side, any creature dies. That is, whenever a creature goes from the battlefield to the graveyard. That is what I'm pretty sure dying is in Magic. Put 2+1/+1 counters on him. So that's pretty amazing. So this deck is, of course, going to be very sacrificey. So, yeah, an aristocrat's deck. And whenever another player loses the game, you gain life equal to that player's life total as the turn began. So this would be actually pretty good against somebody who maybe died of poison counters, as long as you're not getting poisoned yourself. Yeah. And then here we have Tevish Zat. I'm not exactly sure on the pronunciation of that, but there we go. Doom of Fools. We'll just call him Big T. He is a legendary planeswalker. Well, all planeswalkers are legendary. Whatever. He is a planeswalker. He starts out with 4. He costs 5. And he's got a +2 ability that makes 2/0/1 Black Thrall creature tokens. That's pretty cool. Good for sacrificing. That's the whole point of Thralls. And then he has a +1 ability under that, which is unusual. Usually it's going to be a minus ability. And you may sacrifice another creature or planeswalker. If you do, draw 2 cards, then draw another card if the sacrificed permanent was a commander. You're not usually going to sacrifice your commander just to draw 3 cards, especially considering the fact that we are building +1/+1 counters onto him. But it's really good for the Thralls and for other creatures that we're going to have in here, as you will see. And Tevish Zat has a pretty cool -10 ability. I forgot to call him Big T just now, whatever. Gain control of all commanders. Put all commanders from the command zone onto the battlefield under your control. That's pretty awesome. And of course, he can be your commander, and he has partner. So, pretty neato. Alright, the first category we're going to look at is ramp. So we've got, of course, Dark Ritual, one of the best black ramp cards in my opinion. And then we've got Commander Sphere, of course. So this will get you, it'll ramp you a bit, and then when you don't need the ramp anymore, you can use it to draw a card. Because you always need cards. We got Arcane Signet, of course. We got Manascape Refractor. This is a really cool artifact that enters the battlefield tapped. That's not the cool thing about it, though. It has all activated abilities of all lands on the battlefield, including your opponent's. And whatever, it also can serve as a swamp or whatever. And you can spend mana as though it were mana of any color to pay the activation costs of Manascape Refractor's abilities. Oh, another thing. If your opponent has like a Gaia's Cradle, this will copy that too. So that's pretty cool. Seer's Lantern. That lets you scry cheaply. That's pretty cool. We got Heraldic Banner. You choose black when it comes into play, and you can tap it for a black, and then your black creatures get +1/+0. Of course, Soul Ring. Gotta have a Soul Ring. Alright, now we're going to go into some cards that are something of a combo, not exactly a combo, but you'll see. We got these 3 right here. Book of Vile Darkness, Hand of Vecna, and Eye of Vecna. All together, they allow you to create a legendary creature named Vecna, who is an 8/8 zombie god, and he also has all the triggered abilities of all these cards. Now, the Book of Vile Darkness does really well in this deck, because at the beginning of your end step, if you lost 2 or more life this turn, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. And those tokens are good for sacrificing or whatever you want to do with them. Hand of Vecna says at the beginning of combat on your turn, equipped creature or a creature you control named Vecna gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your hand. And equip cost is pay a life for each card in your hand. Or 2, whichever is less. And Eye of Vecna. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card and you lose 2 life. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay 2. If you do, draw a card and you lose 2 life. So, good stuff there. You're not likely to get all 3 out in a game, but you might. You never know. Okay, here we have... I'm not sure what all these categories are, actually. I set them up yesterday, and I have gone to sleep and woken up since then, so whatever. Rise of the Dreadmarn. Create X black zombie berserker creature tokens, where X is the number of non-creature tokens that died this turn. Oh, yes, that's good. If you sacrifice a bunch of creatures in a turn, you get more creatures to sacrifice. Good stuff. And we've got Doomed Dissenter. When he dies, create a 2/2 black creature token. So you sacrifice him, and then you get another creature to sacrifice. That's the idea. And then we got Sparring Construct. 1/1, when he dies, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So if you have the Baron out, you get an additional +1/+1 in addition to the 2 that he gets under his normal ability. Here we have Noose Graph Mob. It is a 0/0 that comes into play, or that enters the battlefield. I always use the old school wording. With 5 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever a player casts a spell, you remove a +1/+1 counter from him, and you put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. So he gives you creatures to sacrifice. Bottle Gnomes, 3/3 trample. When he dies, you gain life equal to its power. So, good creature to sacrifice. I guess that's the category here. Shambling Ghast. When he dies, it's a 1/1 zombie for 1. And when he dies, you can either give a creature an opponent controls -1/-1 until end of turn, or you can create a treasure token. Win-win situation for you. Here we got Perilous Mirror. When he dies, deals 2 damage to any target. Death triggers. Zat's Will? I don't know. T-Dawg's Will. Choose one. If you control a commander as you cast the spell, you may choose both. These spells are always great. Each opponent sacrifices a creature they control with the greatest power, or exile all creatures from all opponents' graveyards, then create X/01 black thrall creature tokens, where X is the greatest power among creatures exiled this way. So, when they both happen, you end up with a potentially large number of thralls. Very cool stuff. Here we have a Skyclave Shade. 3/1 with kicker, he can't block. A 3/1 for 2. So, that alone makes it pretty okay. But if he was kicked, he comes into play with 2 +1/+1 counters on it, so he can be a 5-mana 5/3. Yeah, that's not that great, but whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if he's in your graveyard and it's your turn, you can cast it from your graveyard this turn. So, a reusable sacrificee. Always handy. Here we have Nested Shambler. If he dies, you get X tapped 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens, where X is his power. So if you pump him up any, then you get more squirrels to sacrifice. Here we have Filigree Crawler, the 2/2 insect artifact creature. When he dies, you get a 1/1 Thopter with flying to sacrifice. Here we have Myriad Construct. 4/4 with kicker 3. If he was kicked, he enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each non-basic land your opponents control. And when he becomes the target of a spell, sacrifice it and create a number of 1/1 colorless construct artifact creature tokens equal to its power. So you're going to get at least 4. So it's 4 mana for a 4/4 that you can't sacrifice this itself, but you can end up with 4 1/1s and that's a pretty good deal for 4 mana. Here we have Reassembling Skeleton. He is a repeatable, a recyclable sacrifice creature. Also makes a really good chump blocker. Next we have this guy right here, Discordant Piper. 2/1, when he dies you get a 0/1 white goat. So sacrifice him, you get another sacrifice. Mere Propagator. 3 of any, tap it, create a token that's a copy of Mere Propagator. So, yeah, he ends up making a whole bunch of little 1/1s. 3 mana is a little much, but it's repeatable, so I suppose it's not that much. Here we have Wand of Orcus. It is a legendary artifact equipment, equip 3. Whenever equipped creature attacks or blocks, it and the zombies you control gain Death Touch until end of turn. And whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, create that many 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. So you put this on the Baron, and he gives you a whole bunch of zombies to either hit your opponent with or sacrifice. Gleaming Barrier. That's a 0/4 wall with Defender, and if it dies, you get a treasure. Good for sacrificing, of course. Here we have Liliana's Servant. 1/2, tap it, sack it, target opponent discards a card. And you do that as a sorcery. So, card that sacrifices itself. It is its own sack outlet. Filigree Familiar. This card is for sacrificing. 2/2. When he comes into play, you gain 2 life, and when he dies, you draw a card. You're definitely going to want that card, because cards are good. When you sacrifice things, you're basically giving up card advantage, unless you sacrifice tokens. Sorcerer's Broom. Whenever you sacrifice another permanent, you can pay 3. If you do, create a token that's a copy of Sorcerer's Broom. So this is a lot like that mirror that I just showed you, but without the tapping. Skeletal Vampire. 3/3 flying. When he enters the battlefield, you get 2 1/1 black bats. And you can pay 5 mana and sacrifice a bat to put 2 black bat creatures tokens. 2 black bat tokens with flying onto the battlefield. And you can sacrifice a bat to regenerate the vampire. So that's cool. You always want to have at least 1 bat out then with him, because as soon as you run out, this is a bit of an expensive card, I know. I traded for this a few weeks ago. Yeah. But Phyrexian Dreadnought, it's a 12/12 trample for 1 mana. And when he comes into play, sacrifice any number of creatures with total power of 12 or more, or bury Phyrexian Dreadnought. So he is here to be a bruiser and also as a sacrifice outlet. And yeah, one of the most fun cards that came out of Mirage. Alright, now here we have some sacrifice outlets. Of course, Ashnod's Altar, one of the best. Sacrifice a creature, add 2 mana of any color. No. Sacrifice a creature, add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. Very cool. We got Carrion. Just an instant, so it only sacrifices 1 creature, but it gives you a 0/1 black Thrall. Is it a Thrall? No, it's a Maggot. Gives you a 0/1 Maggot for every amount of power. Whatever, that's a bad wording. You get a bunch of 0/1 black maggots according to the power of the creature you sacrificed. So sacrifice something big, you get a whole lot of maggots. Witch's Oven. Tap it, sack it. Not sack it. Tap it, sack a creature, create a food token, and if the creature was big enough, if it had 4 power or greater, you get 2 food tokens instead. Good stuff. Here we have Gingerbrute, 1/1 haste. You can make him not be blocked except by creatures with haste, or you can sacrifice him for 3 life. So he is a food, and that's why he's here. For you to eat. Let's see, Sepulchre Ghoul. Sepulchre sounds correct. Anyway, a 2/1 zombie. Sacrifice another creature. It gets +2/+2 until end of turn, but you can only use that ability once each turn. But you can use it during your opponent's turn, so you can actually use it 3 times, 4 times per round. Braids, Arisen Nightmare, 3/3, legendary. This lady could be a pretty good commander by herself, but in this deck, she helps sacrifice. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker, so basically any non-token permanent. Any non-land, non-token permanent, that is. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a creature type with it, a card type with it, I mean. For each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. So it's a win-win situation for you. It does give your opponent the choice, but it's not a great choice. I think most of the time people would prefer to sacrifice something. Oh, and you know what? I said non-token, but actually you can sacrifice tokens to it, so forgive me. Delete that comment. Alright, Bankrupt in Blood. As an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice 2 creatures, and you draw 3 cards. Good stuff, so that's a win-win. You get to sacrifice, and you get more cards. Mere Scrappling, sacrifice him, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So this is just like that other Mere that when it dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, but this one has its own sacrifice ability rather than needing an outlet. Grafted War Gear, it doesn't exactly sacrifice creatures, but that's not really what's important. The important thing is that when this becomes unattached from a creature, which can do for free, that creature... Oh, you do sacrifice. Okay, good. Yeah, you have to sacrifice the creature that you unattach it from, so that's good stuff. Gift of Doom. Gift of Dr. Doom is an enchant creature, and enchanted creature has death touch and indestructible, not instructible, and it's got morph, so you can play it as a 2/2 morphed creature, face down. And when it's turned face up, you may attach it to a creature. Oh, and you sacrifice a creature to morph it, so that's why it's a sacrifice outlet. And that's why it's good. Oh, this is a great sack outlet. Fallen Angel. You can activate this ability as many times as you want, anytime you want. 3/3 flying, sacrifice a creature. Fallen Angel gets +2/+1 till end of turn. So you get a beefy creature. One of your commanders also gets beefier. It's a win-win. Village Rites. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature, and you draw 2 cards. Simple yet effective. Slimy yet satisfying. Here we have Bolas's Citadel, another classic. You may look at the top card of your library anytime, and you can play the top card of your library, and you can pay life equal to its converted mana cost instead of paying in mana. So this is an amazing card. This is basically Yawgmoth's Bargain, but maybe even better. Enough said about that. Now, Illicit Shipment. I think we're in a different category now. Casualty 3, so as you cast this spell, you can sacrifice a creature with power 3 or greater. When you do, copy the spell, and then it's a tutor. Search a library for any card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So it is both a sacrifice outlet and a tutor. Here we have Cloudkill. All creatures get -X/-X until end of turn, where X is the greatest mana value of a commander you own in the battlefield or in the command zone, which was going to be 6. So all creatures get -6/-6 until end of turn. It's an effective board wipe for creatures. Though not a true board wipe. A true board wipe destroys lands too. That is my belief anyway. Blood Beckoning. It's kicker 3, costs 1 black, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. I mean, that alone without the kicker, it's basically the same thing as Raise Dead. If the spell was kicked, instead return 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. So if you're later in the game, you got plenty of mana, this can get you 2 of your creatures back. Return from Extinction. You can either return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand for 2, or you can return 2 creature cards that share a creature type from your graveyard to your hand. Good stuff. Raise Dead, the classic from 6th edition. Return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Simple, effective, good stuff. Call of the Death Dealer. Return up to 2 creature cards with total converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, and put a Death Touch counter on either of them, then put a Menace counter on the other one. Oh, no, on either one. You can put both counters, actually, on the same creature if you want. So that's pretty cool. Liliana, Untouched by Death. Legendary Planeswalker comes out with 4 loyalty counters. +1 ability, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. If at least 2 of them is a zombie, each creature loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. -2, target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of zombies you control. Or the reason it's in this deck, the -3 ability, you may cast zombie cards from your graveyard this turn. There are quite a few zombies in this deck. They're good for sacrificing, and that lets you get them back. Doomed Necromancer, 2/2, black and sacrifice it. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, good sack outlet. It is its own sack outlet, and it also gives you a creature back, and it's especially effective if you get out a creature that gives you another creature when it dies, because then you get 3 sacrifices for the price of 1 or 2. Omen of the Dead, a enchantment with flash. A enchantment? Yes, I said it. A enchantment, whatever. When it enters the battlefield, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So it is a raised dead, but it also can allow you to scry. So whichever one you need to do. Macabre Waltz. Macabre Waltz? I don't know. I think a lot of people pronounce this word differently. I don't usually pronounce it at all, because I never really need to say it. Return up to 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand, then discard a card. Not a bad return for 2 mana. And then we've got Null Priest of Oblivion. A 2/1 with Kicker, Menace, and Lifelink. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So 4 mana to resurrect something is a pretty decent rate. It's like Dread Return, but a little easier to cast, to pay. Here we have a card I just got recently, maybe a couple days ago. Drivnod, Carnage Dominus. 8/3 Phyrexian Horror. If a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. That is pretty amazing. So it gives your Baron 4 +1/+1 counters when anything dies. And you can play 2 black Phyrexian mana, so either 2 black, 4 life, or a black and 2 life. Exile 3 cards from your graveyard, put an indestructible counter on Drivnod Carnage Dominus. So that'll make him harder to destroy, because as he is, he can be lightning bolted into oblivion. Caged Zombie, 2/3, one of any a black, tap it. Each opponent loses 2 life. Activate this ability only if a creature died this turn. So this category is cards that take advantage of death. Warlock Class. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, each opponent loses 1 life. So that's pretty cool. At level 2, when this class becomes level 2, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. So that'll get creatures into your graveyard for later recursion or whatever. And level 3, at the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses life equal to the life they lost this turn. So, very offensive card. Liliana's Standard Bearer. Bearer. Liliana's Standard Bearer. 3/1 with flash. When he enters the battlefield, draw X cards, where X is the number of creatures that died under your control this turn. Good for turns when you have sacrificed a bunch of creatures. Here we have Weatherlight Completed, 5/5 flying, a vehicle. As long as Weatherlight Completed has 4 or more Phyresis counters on it, it's a Phyrexian creature in addition to its other types. And whenever a creature you control dies, say through being sacrificed, put a Phyresis counter on Weatherlight Completed. Then draw a card if it has 7 or more Phyresis counters on it, so you're probably going to get to that pretty quickly. And if it doesn't, scry 1, and that's still pretty good. Liliana's Decree is Devotee, not Decree. We already did a Decree. Liliana's Devotee. 2/3 zombies you control get +1/+0. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, you may pay one of any in a black. If you do, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So, good for getting a few more creatures to sacrifice. Grim Haruspex. 3/2 with Morph, and whenever another non-token creature you control dies, draw a card. Pretty handy. Blood Artist. Whenever Blood Artist or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So this is potentially a win condition. Kind of a slow one, but it works. Malefic Scythe. It comes into the battlefield with a soul counter, and equipped creature gets +1/+1 for every soul counter on it. And whenever the creature it's on dies, you put a soul counter on it. So you want to put this on a creature that you sacrifice, and it only costs 1 to equip, so it's worth doing. And it gets it bigger. Sengir Connoisseur. 3/3 flying vampire. Whenever one or more other creatures dies, put a +1/+1 counter on her, and this ability triggers only once each turn. So she gradually gets bigger, but it triggers during your opponent's turn too, so very good stuff. Here we have Tabarax, Hope's Demise, 2/2 flying. He's got lifelink as long as it has 5 or more +1/+1 counters. And whenever another non-token creature you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Tabarax. If that creature was a cleric, you may draw a card. If you do, lose 1 life. So good card for helping you to draw, and it's a good card for getting bigger. Alright, now we're moving into the lands, I think. High Market, tap it, sacrifice a creature, gain 1 life, so it's a sacrifice outlet, in addition to giving you mana. Haunted Fengraf, tap for a colorless mana, or you can sacrifice it to return a creature at random from your graveyard to your hand. So if you just need a sacrifice creature, there you go, that'll give you something to sacrifice. Baron Moore. Phyrexia's Core. When of any, tap it, sacrifice an artifact, you gain 1 life. So most of the sacrificing in this deck is done with creatures, but I don't know, this could help you out. At the very least, it's a mana producer. This is fake, of course, but it's a really good fake from Wish. So, if you're going to use proxies, pay a little for them. Tap to sacrifice one of your creatures in exchange for a number of life points equal to its toughness. The old wording is so good. It's so janky and awkward and great. Note that this ability may be used after blocking has been declared. Make sure you note that. You have to. It doesn't say you may note it. You have to note it. No choice. Bojuka Bog, of course, this is a great card. Enters the battlefield tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, exile all cards from target player's graveyard. A lot of people say this is an absolute staple in black decks. I don't put it on all my black decks, but actually I think this is my only mono black deck, so maybe I do. Myriad Landscape comes into play tapped, taps for a colorless, or you can sacrifice it to search a library for up to 2 basic lands that share a land type, and put them on the battlefield tapped. And of course, we're all about swamps in this deck, so that restriction does not bother us. Witch's Cottage. It's a swamp, so it taps to add black. And when it enters the battlefield tapped... Oh, not when it enters the battlefield. It enters the battlefield tapped, unless you control 3 or more other swamps. And in that case, you get a creature back from your graveyard to the top of your library. But if it's in your opening hand, that's just too bad. Desert of the Glorified. Desert of the Glorified. Yeah, enters the battlefield tapped, it's a desert, taps for a black, and it's got cycling. Rogue's Passage. Good card for getting your big bruiser of a vampire through. And Mortuary Mire enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, you may put target creature from your graveyard on top of your library. So this is a little bit like... Let me find it here. So this is basically a better Witch's Cottage, because it doesn't depend on being brought into play untapped, but there's no option for it coming into play untapped. So bit of a trade-off there. And the rest is swamps. Swamps all the way down. So there we have it. That is my Dark Baron and T-Dawg deck. What do you think? Let me know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe, donate to my Patreon today, and all that jazz. Actually, I don't think I put a link to my Patreon. Whatever, because no one really seems to want to donate. But whatever, I don't care. Anyway, tell me what you think.